February 28th, 2005 was Arnie Feast's first day as a pilot for MJM Air. He and his passengers, including my husband Dave Stevens, Fabian Bedard, brothers Doug and Trevor Decock, departed the float-equipped Beaver at 10 past 10 in the morning. When they didn't arrive at their destination the expected half hour later, the dispatcher was notified, but without a radio in the office, she was limited to the use of telephone to try to contact the pilot and find out his whereabouts. It was about an hour after that when the chief pilot returned from his annual medical, and when she told him the plane was missing, he told her she worried too much and proceeded to drink a few cups of coffee before he decided to go up on a revenue flight to another part of the area. It wasn't until 2 p.m., almost 4 hours after the plane had disappeared, and that they were notified it was missing before search and rescue was called. It was 6 o'clock that night as I sat nursing my 2-month-old baby, and just as the evening news was about to come on, that Dave's boss called me and said, "The plane's missing." "What do you mean the plane's missing?" "I don't know, it's missing," he said. I couldn't understand. I mean, I can buy a GPS tracker and I can follow you all the way up into the mountains. I know where you are on your telephone. What do you mean? How does a plane just disappear? I didn't get it. We were headline news right in front of my eyes as I was being told this. And not knowing where the aircraft had disappeared to, the search extended over thousands of kilometers. It was on the third day that my husband's body was discovered on the shore of an island just 5 minutes from home. The next day was the Mayerthorpe tragedy, and we were forgotten. Not just by the press, but also by the government. The coroner performed Dave's autopsy the next week, calling me with her conclusions as I headed out the door to his funeral. She explained that he had escaped the aircraft, but had drowned after suffering extensively from hypothermia, despite wearing his Mustang survival floater coat. I'll never know how long he floated out there, cold, wet, exhausted, and alone, waiting for the rescue that never came. Witnesses in the area heard the aircraft hit the water, correctly identified the area in which it crashed. The authorities, though, soon gave up the search. The families did not. I'd like you to keep in mind the Cougar crash while I'm talking about this, the helicopter that crashed off the East Coast. Our story is very different. We didn't give up the search because we wanted to know what had happened. We wanted to bring the other boys home. We were all certain everybody had been trapped inside the aircraft. Friends, neighbors, the community rallied around and volunteered time and equipment, whatever we could use. It was exactly 5 months to the day after the accident that we recovered the fuselage. The engine had separated due to corrosion. The clock had stopped just 6 minutes after takeoff. We learned we were wrong, that nobody had been trapped inside, that all 5 men had unbuckled their seatbelts and escaped, leaving their life jackets still sealed and stowed inside the aircraft. The recovery of the fuselage did not result in any further investigation. We later learned that the TSB had written a brief letter to the coroner. Actually, they'd written the letter prior to our recovering the fuselage, and then after we recovered the fuselage, they changed a couple of things, including adding the flight controls, and that was just about it. And that was going to be the end of their investigation. But they didn't tell us that, and they didn't tell the coroner that. We were pretty unhappy with the letter to the coroner, and of course we were expecting the coroner to produce a coroner's report. We wanted to make sure they had all the information that they required to do an accurate report. And so we asked for a meeting with the RCMP and the coroner and the TSB and Transport Canada, all the official bodies who were involved in any form of investigation. Transport Canada declined to come. I guess they didn't want to answer some hard questions. And eventually, because we kept insisting, we were sort of promised a $10,000 reward if we were successful in recovering the engine. And so we spent about 2.5 years hindered by financial considerations and equipment breakdowns, weather, etc. But in September 2007, almost over 2.5 years after the accident itself, Kevin Deacock, whose 2 brothers had been on board, he used a camera-baited hook, which he had designed himself, manufactured the hook on the end of a 1,000-foot tether to bring the engine 850 feet to the surface. It seemed nothing short of a miracle. It didn't explain what brought the aircraft down. After the TSB had completed its examination of the engine, the families, disappointed in the lack of results, contracted the services of R.J. Waldron and Company, a highly respected firm specializing in forensic aviation investigations. It would be several more months before they released their summary report and recommendations, which clearly identified the poor condition of the aircraft prior to the accident and denounced the TSB's lack of investigation, suggesting that that very failure had possibly resulted in critical evidence being lost forever. Now that firm, which once worked cooperatively with the TSB on behalf of operators and insurance companies, is now being shut out of TSB investigations. They're feeling the repercussions of whistleblowing, the repercussions of telling the truth. Easily $250,000 later, the families having spent at least. All we know for sure is that every single government agency that had an interest in the accident has failed us. The lack of reporting by the Transportation Safety Board had resulted in a lack of information, which Transport Canada blamed, along with the pilot's missing body, for its failure to investigate for Canada Labour Code infringements. Disputes over jurisdictional access meant that the Workers' Compensation Board did not investigate for the CLC infractions, which may have led to the deaths of the 4 loggers, including my husband. Communication failures meant that it was just last week, over 4 years after the accident, before we received our coroner's report. The report itself was riddled with inaccuracies and misinformation. Many of the recommendations that the coroner made had been made before by the TSB and by Transport Canada, but had not been acted on. Recommendations that might have saved the lives of all on board and certainly would have saved the life of my husband. Other recommendations were clearly made by someone with little understanding of the aviation industry, such as suggesting that a life raft should be carried on single-engine float planes. We'd held out so much hope that the coroner's report would bring us some sense of closure, and we felt very let down. The feeling of having been failed by the governing agencies, those whose job it was to protect our loved ones, to investigate their workplace deaths, to take quick remedial action and make immediate recommendations and follow through with them to prevent future such tragedies. Policies, procedures, and the misunderstood rules of jurisdictional access all played a part in prolonging our grief, in denying us closure. Who was accountable for these failures? I can't change what happened that day, and I can't bring back Dave or any of the other men lost on that fateful day. But I decided there was something I could do, something I had to do. I started researching, reading, talking, and listening to people working in the aviation industry. Many of you here already know me. I know you. I built a website, I wrote letters to unions, to government officials, to anyone I thought might listen, and slowly people did start paying attention. Aviation workers, accident victims and their families, workers from other industries, often transported by air, started coming to me for advice, guidance, and help. Our accident seemed to be the perfect example of every hole in the Swiss cheese model lining up, even highlighting the issues of jurisdictional access which hadn't been previously identified. We started a petition demanding this accident be a starting point for a public inquiry into the oversight of small and remote operations. We've never publicized that petition, but even so have gained over 1,500 signatures, most of whom are pilots themselves.